I want to just take a moment to welcome everyone in person and on the live stream. Welcome to our panel on, the weaponization of our tax dollars. So my name is Jose Melendez. I am the campaign director for our Taxpayer Protection Project at TPPF. Essentially, my team looks at, taxes, spending, local government policies, and how we can reduce the burden of government on the people. But the best way I can summarize it is my team likes to throw rocks at greedy local governments. So this issue of taxpayer-funded lobbying is #1 priority this session for my team. The best way I can define, taxpayer-funded lobbying is by saying governments are lobbying governments for more government. And, if you think about what they're doing, they're coming to our capital. You think about issues like school choice or property tax reform. On one side, you have the people, folks who pay their way to the Capitol to visit, their capital, to testify in support of school choice, property tax reform, and all our conservative priorities. On the other side, you have folks who are using our tax dollars to advocate against those same priorities. And today, I think we're going to get into a discussion on what the problem is and what the solution is. And I have a fantastic panel here with me. Give me a moment to introduce them because I think they deserve it. Senator Middleton serves the people of Senate District 11. Prior to serving in the Texas Senate, Senator Middleton served 2 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, representing chambers in Galveston counties. He currently serves as the Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee on Higher Education and on Local Government, as well as a member of the Senate Committees on Administration, Business and Commerce, Education, Jurisprudence, and State Affairs. Senator Middleton is president of Middleton Oil Company, an independent oil and gas company. He also runs ranching, cattle, and farming operations. He got his BA and JD from the University of Texas at Austin. He and his wife, Macy, have 4 children. Representative Terri Wilson from House District 23. Transitioning from the classroom to the Capitol, Representative Wilson represents House District 23, where she ranked as the most conservative freshman for the 88th legislative session. She is serving on the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee and the Public Education Committee for the 89th legislature. Prior to her legislative tenure, she predominantly served middle school students with special needs in Texas public schools, as well as served with distinction on the State Board of Education, better known as the SBOE. Representative Leo Wilson received the American Exceptionalism Award from Americans for Prosperity for her work on writing curriculum, ensuring that students understood the benefits of the free enterprise system. She has undergraduate degrees in elementary and special education and a master's degree in educational administration from Texas A&M University Commerce. She and her husband Dave reside on Galveston Island and have 5 children and 5 grandchildren. Dr. Mary Bone. Yes. Served as trustee on the Round Rock ISD School Board, Place 2, from November 20 until 2024. Utilizing her experience as a trustee, she continues to advocate to empower parents and children in Texas schools. She currently teaches at the University of Southeastern Norway and is a consultant for NASA. Dr. Bone has her BS in Aerospace Engineering from Missouri University of Science and Technology, her Master's of Engineering from Iowa State University, and her Ph.D. in Systems Engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. She and her husband, Jason, have been married for 24 years and have 2 daughters. So, Senator Middleton, you've been in the trenches on this issue for every legislative session that you've been in the Texas House and then the Texas Senate. Every year, if I have this correct, before every session, during pre-filing, on the very first day, this is the first bill that you file. Yes. Can you tell us the extent of the problem and what the solution is?
It is the first bill that I always file every single session, and this is persistence, right, and goal of what we got to get done for our state. And basically what's happening is your tax dollars are being weaponized against you. It's a way the left can continue to get their way when they can't win elections. and get their way in the legislature and stop conservative legislation. And it's probably worse than USAID, actually, because it's more direct, right? These are your property tax dollars, right? So you don't like what Target stands for, you don't go there, you don't shop there. You don't like what Bud Light stands for, you don't buy it. But if you don't like what, say, your school district is lobbying on, or your city or county, you quit paying your property taxes, and what happens, right? They take your home or your business. Well, that's not exactly fair, and that's forced speech. So that's why we need to ban this unethical and, frankly, corrupt practice in the state of Texas. And that is always the first bill that I always file, because I see all the time how just wrong it is where you're there in committee. I see a lot of people in the audience today that comes to committee to support conservative bills because you believe in it, right? Well, unfortunately, right after you testify, there's usually someone paid for with your property tax dollars that's against what you believe in. You took the day off of work, right? You're not a paid lobbyist. I see it all the time, like on school choice as well. Moms that are like, give us this chance, give us this choice, have money follow my child. I can't afford to send them to private school but for this. And then right after she testifies, there's someone that's paid for with her school tax dollars to lobby against her. So it's fundamentally wrong. This needs to be number one on the Texas Doge list here. And it's about $100 million a year that we're wasting. I mean, it's ridiculous. We don't need a taxpayer-funded middleman between your state representative, your state senator, and your local government. That is our job to do that.
Can you tell us why there's a focus on the Chapter 305 registered lobbyists?
Right, so that's the trigger of it, right? So when you are paid or compensated and spend time in the Capitol, you have to register to lobby, right? That's not what anyone here is doing, I don't think. It's because you believe in it. Well, these guys are hired guns, right? And that's what we're going after, is the hired guns that live and work in Austin. I'll say this, they represent Travis County values and Austin values really well. They just don't represent the rest of Texas values very well. And that's another reason why we need to ban it. It's totally out of step with our Texas conservative values. But that's the trigger, is when you have to register. That point, those tax dollars cannot go to a registered lobbyist, nor can they go to an association that has registered lobbyists and represents local government, right? So you got to cover both of those. Because as we've seen, like Texas Association of School Boards, and I know Dr. Bone has a few words on that later, and so do I, with experience with them. Really bad actors out there. And they were really, some of those associations, especially TASB, was advancing Joe Biden's agenda, their tax dollars here in Texas. They knew we wouldn't pass any of that woke junk that he wanted, but they were lobbying for it with their tax dollars, making sure it happened in Texas.
So on that note, you mentioned TASB, Dr. Mary Bone. You've been in the inner workings of the beast. You've been a school board member at Round Rock ISD. Just shed a little light on what you saw and what the problem is.
Sure. So when I became a trustee, I became a member of this thing called TASB, which I didn't even really know what it was. I was naive. And I've never been forced to be a member of an association maybe that I didn't agree with, their values. And if you recall, I became a trustee in November of 2020. It was in the heat of COVID. So if you recall, we were masking our children. And that was one of the things that I ran for. People were begging us to take the mask off their children's, and it was bipartisan. There was many people on both sides that said, stop masking children. And I started realizing that this association, TASB, that they weren't gonna help us, and they were actually on the other side of that issue. And even if you recall, I believe it was 2020, early in 2022, that Governor Abbott said you can't mask children anymore. And then TASB, if you don't know, they actually write our policies for school districts, and they're still kind of continuing. In fact, I just reread an email where they were saying that maybe we could put mask as dress code in our policies, because they were trying to, they were helping us, right, in any way. They go out of their way to help advance these leftist agendas. And I was appalled that I had to be a member of them. We actually asked our school district if we could not be a member. Trustee Danielle Weston and I did. And they couldn't figure out how to not make us members. I also realized that we never voted on it as a board. So we're not voted on, it continually keeps getting renewed. I was at a conference and I talked to some folks from a smaller school district, a very tiny district, and they were surprised at some of the values that TASB had. And me being in Round Rock, TASB has, I don't know if it's their headquarters, but they have a big presence there. And so we get to see, from the front row, their values and what they're doing. And these tiny districts, they didn't even, the trustees didn't even know the values that they were advancing down here at the Capitol. I also came to the Capitol and I testified on school choice last session, and I was surprised that, there's TASB folks right behind me. And so I'm a mom and a trustee at the time, so it's not even when you're a mom. I got elected to my school board from my community, and I'm here at the Capitol, trying to testify, and I'm up against these people that are backed by, and I actually went and grabbed their 990 because I like numbers, by the way, I'm an engineer. And they bring in $91 million. And again, they're fully funded by tax dollars. I believe a little bit of that comes from royalties, but obviously, if you trace that all the way back, it's from tax dollars. So they were weaponizing an association that I'm made to be a member of against me, not only as a mom, but as a trustee. It was really appalling, and it is why I started looking into them and, appreciate what Mays does and understood why he filed the bills that you file.
So Representative Leo Wilson, do you think that taxpayer-funded lobbyists, silence the votes or the voices of everyday citizens?
Oh, absolutely. You all have in the Bill of Rights the absolute right to go and redress your government. The government has no right to redress the government. And that's really what we have here is what you mentioned, Mary, is very real, and the intimidation. I think in God there is no coincidence, and that I ended up in Mays' district because I started 20 years ago on the battle of banning taxpayer-funded lobbyists. I didn't know that's what I was doing back then, but it's really great to be partnered with you, so knowledgeable and on the forefront and just hammering it everywhere you go. And, and it's gained such support that I feel confident it's going to pass this session. But in the beginning, you had maybe 7 people? Yeah, but in 2000, I was elected to the State Board of Education. And that year we were working on history TEKS. And so that the TEKS are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, what every child must know to get to the next grade level. And so I get this notice, and I'm automatically a member of the National Association of State School Boards. They send down a notice wanting us to adopt rules, put rules in place and adopt their national citizenship curriculum. So I was like, okay, let me look at it. So on the very front page, it says Bill of Rights, and then it says separation of church and state. They leave out free press, free speech. They leave out the ability to go and seek redress from your government. They leave out 4 pieces of the Bill of Rights and put in something that's not in the Bill of Rights. So I got mad, and I was like, why am I a member of this place? Well, so they're like, well, you get to go to the conference. And so I looked at the conference agenda. On the conference agenda is like, okay, I got to go. I want to be picked. I'm a freshman. Hopefully they'll let me go because I've never been. I wanted to go and take notes because I see on there that they're having a whole session on what state school boards should do for bullying of students. But it's being presented by the Centers for Disease Control. I'm like, okay, bullying is a behavior. Like, it's not a disease. Why are they presenting? I'll tell you more later. And then the third thing is we have abstinence-based sex ed curriculum in Texas. And of course, theirs is comprehensive sex ed, right? So I'm like, why are we've got 10 Republicans on this dang board. Why are we sending money off? So I went to the conference, I took my little notes, I spoke up, like the little mad moms do, and I spoke up and I said, okay, why are you encouraging state boards of education to develop separate policies passed down to the local school board members that would have a different policy if you're homosexual? and you would have a different penalty if you bullied somebody. I said, bullying is wrong. I don't want a chubby little girl with freckles and red hair to be bullied any more than a homosexual student. This is wrong. This is, against, treating everybody equally. So that's when I brought back that information. I took my little notes. Oh, but when I was in there, all of a sudden, I get the president of the National School Board sitting behind me. I get two of their members sitting on each side of me, like to silence me. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to the next session. And so I took the notes. I went back to the board. Then they started writing articles about me in the Washington Times or the New York, Washington Post and the New York Times. Yeah, but I'm like, because I'm threatening them and saying, we're going to take our money in Texas and go home. We don't need you. You are developing things that are totally against what our current laws in Texas say. And so they realize that's a huge chunk of change, because how NASB does their billing is they base it on your student population in your state. So Texas is paying the most, right? And I'm like, why? Why are we letting you run the show? So that was, all that media attention was to not get it on the floor. Because as you know, there are certain Republicans that don't want to take hard votes, right? So they are trying everything to keep it from a vote. But I know if I get it to the floor, I got all 10 Republicans. Because there's no way they can take a public vote against opposing our, and we got out. I think they're back in, aren't they, Mary?
No, they went out.
They are, okay.
They might be back in. No, they're back.
Are they back in? Okay. Yes, and then I had a whole experience with TASB, but I don't want to take up the whole time, so.
No.
But I do have some great TASB quotes.
Yes. Well, staying with you, how optimistic do you think folks should be about the passage of this bill in the Texas House?
I am very, very optimistic. We have a speaker that supports this issue that was the co-author of the House bill last session. So he very much supports, and part of his emphasis, and you heard him talk a little bit about the Death Star bill and regulatories, agencies, and he has really sought to undo that. And TASB, and the taxpayer-funded lobbyists have always worked against that. They want more regulations. They don't want less regulations. So he's had experience with them coming against his bills as well. So, which is a good thing now, because I think that the House is ripe to pass it. I really do. So I'm excited. And because of the groundwork that Middleton has done as well, is just every time, back, punch it. So, and even like he would call me on a candidate this year, and he's like, well, that candidate doesn't support taxpayer ban, a ban on taxpayer law. So we would have these discussions, and so because that was always forefront. But honestly, they are the one thing that hinders us. They promote bonds that get us more in debt. For every $100 that they advocate for bond issues for school districts, I think it's like they get $100,000 back, because those preferred vendors on their list, their tentacles, will do all the contract work for whatever bond the bond is going for. So it's incestuous, it really is.
I think Dr. Mary Bone has experience with this during her time with TASB.
Yeah, so TASB, I'll just go into how TASB works. So I think some people might, if you don't know how TASB works, for one thing, everybody talks about superintendent salaries. Well, the head of TASB is a superintendent, which, think about that. Why is a superintendent the head of a Texas Association of School Boards? He has not been on a school board, so why is he the head? But I went and pulled, with all of his benefits, he is making $476,000 a year. So that's probably higher than almost all. I think there's one or two other superintendents in Texas that make that. And I tell you that because the way it works is these superintendents, and by the way, I should add, there's multiple of them. They actually, there's another one, the next one makes $451,000. There's all these directors, financial officers, of course, $349,000. They're kind of hidden, because if you'll go out to Twitter, you'll see everybody's all upset about the superintendents. Well, this is also tax dollars that are funding these people. And there's multiple of them making what a superintendent makes. So I was in Round Rock. We have about 6,400 employees, 47,000 students. We're bigger than TASB. But why are these people making that kind of money off of taxpayers? And what you have is the superintendents and people that work in school districts, that this is where you want to go, right? I mean, you know, we all want to make money, right? So this is where you want to go. So you want to be friendly with TASB. So they've set up this system where TASB is where all these administrators and people want to go work because they make a lot of money. And so you have that first. And then you do have, the thing that you have about TASB is they don't just have taxpayer-funded lobbying. That's only one small part of what they have. If you go look, I think they say they spend about $2 million a year on taxpayer. That's what they claim. But behind that, they have all these services. And you were talking about they're in your policy. Plus, they have this whole organization that is feeding out, because if I went and looked, I don't think they're, the head of the organization is actually registered as a lobbyist. I don't know if Dan Troxel is. Is he? He may be, but you have all these people that are sending out emails all day. They have a whole team behind them that are just getting other people to come down to the Capitol. They're not down here lobbying, but they have a whole team that's dedicated to PR. As a trustee, I would get emails daily. I've searched on Maze's name before, and they're always, you know, emailing us, go testify about this taxpayer-funded lobbying, or go testify against ESAs or vouchers. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was just across the board. Yeah, it's across the board. So they're sending all these trustees across Texas that they have access to. They're sending us all the time. Go get involved. Go down and testify. And I also, that was one of the things that I started seeing too, is all their emails were leaning towards bills that I was like, I would pass these. But they also, so they have all of the lobbying. They have all these people, you know, back at the office emailing trustees. But they also have services. So they sell things like energy. They sell all of our HR policies and our HR, like how you manage HR in the district. They also, by the way, community colleges. So they also do community colleges across Texas. So they have got their tentacles into many things. And they have a thing called Buy Board. And Buy Board is something else that they have where it's a cooperative. It's another bill that we need to fix. There's a loophole in our laws that allows this Buy Board to be a cooperative. And then these contractors can become part of the cooperative, and then school district superintendents do not have to go out for competitive bids. They just get the bid. And so when I was a trustee, very, very rarely did we have bidding come to us for votes. It was always on like huge buildings. But again, this is a network. I do call it the Big Ed cartel. And TASB is a pinnacle in that, in the fact that they have, you know, almost $100 million a year. And they have this whole network that's being paid by our tax dollars to work against, again, and you can't stress this enough, Maze, it's against our values of Texas. And it was so weird for me. I mean, it still is kind of, it's mind-boggling why we allow this. And I think we really need to let the rural folks know what TASB is about, because TASB sells themselves. And I was telling Jose right before this that they actually, I was trying to find some information, they actually delete stuff off of their website. Mm-hmm. So lots of the COVID stuff, it's all gone, because if you went back, you'd be like, oh my gosh, they're left-wing nut jobs. But that's what, so they delete it. And if you go look, all their stuff looks very, you know, kind of bipartisan and very nice. I will also add, they also have the legal side. And that's the other piece that they have for trustees. They also have a bunch of lawyers that they employ. And they give your trustees legal advice. And again, I have a Ph.D. in engineering. I've worked at a very high level in corporations. I've worked with lawyers. And their lawyers, by the way, can also be right or left, if you don't know. And I would talk to their lawyers, and their lawyers were very left. And I was like, okay, you're giving me like horrible advice, and you're very like bent on this, which a good lawyer, by the way, doesn't, right? That's the whole thing. They shouldn't be bent one way or the other. And so they have all your trustees are also getting advice from them legally. So your kids don't stand a chance. The children in your school districts, they don't stand a chance because they have got a grip on all the important keys in a school district. And then they're down here at the Capitol petitioning against you. So sorry that's kind of long, but it's kind of the short of how they work.
I mean, that hit the nail on the head for sure. Yeah.
And I do want to stay on TASB. Senator Middleton, you have a bill, I think it's Senate Bill 758, basically says that if a public entity receives most of their funding from tax dollars, that they are subject to the Public Information Act, and we can submit a public information request for these entities. Can you tell us more about this, Bill?
Yeah, so, one of the things is it's a way to hide from the taxpayer, right? Because so much of what cities, counties, school districts rely on as far as how they're going to, what vote they're going to take, what they're going to support and oppose, they just look to the taxpayer-funded lobbying group, whether it's TML, TAC, or TASB. And we have no idea because we all do an open records. Oh, nope, that's a nonprofit statewide association. We don't have to tell you. So essentially, they're hiding these records from the taxpayer, and it's all our dollars paying for it, right? Actually, Texas Municipal League has been training local electeds in how to avoid open records requests. And almost all of them get appealed, like to the Attorney General, they're suing, and all of that is to hide how your tax dollars are spent and hide the records that you've paid for as a taxpayer from you. And you got to ask, well, what are you hiding? Well, we know it's not good things, right? Yeah, I mean, we've seen this. It's not just TASB. Like, for example, last session, Texas Conference of Urban Counties opposed our strongest border security bill ever. That was HB4, SB4, and that's the criminal trespass charges for illegal immigrants. A few sessions ago, the subsidiary of Texas Association of Counties, the Association of Election Administrators, opposed citizenship verification of our voter rolls, right? And then other things as well, like TASB supports DEI. They have it in their statement of beliefs, supporting diversity, equity, inclusion. That's in their statement of beliefs, right? What does that tell you? And they actually even invited transgender students in to train school board members on gender pronouns with your tax dollars. That's what they're doing with your tax dollars, and that's why this has got to end. This practice has got to end. TML calls you the money tree. They said shaking the money tree. It's one of Texas Municipal League's trainings and how to, I guess, shake pennies out of your pocket, so taxpayers' pockets. And they're the ones that are training our local elected officials, and a lot of times, we see them lie again and again, and they say, oh, well, we can't have a voice in Austin without our lobbyists. It's like, no, government doesn't have any rights. The rights belong to the people, and we grant those rights to the government. And we can revoke them at any time, right? It's government of the people, by the people, for the people. I think Abraham Lincoln said that, as we all know. And that's what we're fighting to protect and defend. It's not a government of, by, and for the taxpayer-funded lobbyists, right? We don't owe anything to them. This government belongs to the people, and we need to make sure it stays that way. But then also, this doesn't stop our local elected officials or their staff from coming to Austin. You keep saying, oh, well, we can't go to Austin anymore if this bill passes. No, there's a total exemption from lobbying for local electeds and their employees coming to Austin to make their voice heard. We want to hear from local government. We want to hear from our local elected officials. And also you hear that it would abolish the associations. No, it won't do that, but what's happening actually is there are services, other services that some of these associations that represent government provide, but they're putting the gun to the head of those services and threatening to pull the trigger unless they support, keeping their Austin taxpayer-funded lobbyists, right? So they're literally threatening the local governments they claim to represent their best interests. And I believe when we passed, SB 19 was filed today, by the way, so we passed, we passed in the Senate 3 times. I'm never going to give up. We're going to keep doing it. But it also, I believe, grows the voice of rural Texas. Because right now, rural cities, counties, school districts, they can't go hire, huge teams like Harris County, Dallas County, Travis County, Bexar County. And so when those big blue counties have to fire their team of taxpayer-funded lobbyists, what does that do? That elevates the voice of not just taxpayers, but of also rural Texas. And how does it really fit with the values of rural Texas when they're supporting things like DEI and against border security and against election integrity? They were for a state income tax. And actually, the lobbyist for County Judges and Commissioners Association, which claims to represent, all the rural counties, he gives the Act Blue. Well, how does Act Blue represent rural Texas that votes about 85% for Trump, right? It doesn't. So clearly, they're not representing who they claim to be representing in Austin.
And if I can add about the TASB and their training and what they represent, some of the interesting ones I saw that they had multiple sessions on how to deal with problem parents. And it's probably not the way we would deal with taxpayers. Problem parents are all, known as taxpayers that come and address their government. They also recently had a session that advised trustees not to give their teachers pay raises. So again, they're working against, and they stated that, and actually TPPF, I believe in one of Mandy's videos, they talk about that. So, their trainings are not our values, and they're very interesting if you go and sit in them. They also talked about how, the other one that I think is really interesting is they actually how to control the media. So they're teaching your school districts how to control the media. In our own school district, we had a superintendent with a permanent restraining order, and you never heard about it. Like, the local Austin media would not pick it up, and the community gets very confused because people are like, it's a news story, why would you not pick it up? They have multiple sessions. The National Association of School Boards had a session. They really spend a lot of time on training your districts on how to control the media and basically strong-arm them so that they don't put out any bad PR. These are not the values of America or Texas.
Yes, I concur. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, and so when I was elected, they also said, okay, we're going to throw these 4 conservatives on the charter school committee because we can't let them touch permanent school fund. We can't let them be on instruction. Oh my goodness. So what did? We got to work like good little conservatives do, and we delved in and figured out that those first generation of charter schools did have some problems, but part of it was because they were giving them out like candy and the rules really hadn't been set up. So we cleaned up that process, but in the midst of that, TASB came after us, and it was like, why would you care about charter schools? They're public schools. And so I want to read you some quotes, and you can look back to what they did with the charter school movement and now what they're doing with the school choice movement. It's the same. It's the same song, same verse, a little bit louder, a little bit worse. But some of the quotes that they have said is, charter schools have significant fiscal impact on school districts. They drain their resources from independent school districts. They often require cuts in teachers, academics, programs, football teams. I mean, isn't that what they're saying now? I mean, they've just transferred the argument. The latest thing, TASB actually had done some polling and studying on the word voucher. And so I always try to correct everybody and say, no, these are educational savings accounts. It's different. They use the word voucher, and they are training and teaching them to use the voucher because they've done polling, and that has a negative impact. So, it just goes on and on. One of the things that they did last year was they created this policy that TASB did on how to deal with parents who come up to your school and want to remove sexually explicit materials from the library. And it always puts the burden on parents. So here's what a parent has to do. First of all, you have to be sure that the parent has discovered the book on their own, or that a student has been even exposed to the book. Then you set up a meeting, and you set it up with your librarian, and your librarians to tell them how great this collection is, and try to persuade them that this is a good thing, right? So imagine being a parent doing this, right? And then they want a formal request in which they know that you have read that sexually explicit book all through, cover to cover. So you have to, as a parent, you have to read it in its entirety. You have to use their quotations. You have to be able to cite what the citations on the page were. And then you also have to suggest to your school board an alternative, okay, if you're not happy. Well, is there a good alternative to erotica? I mean, come on. So, no sense at all. And then it goes before a panel of 5 people. 3 of them are school district members, and it's majority decision, of course. So this is what you have to do, or their instructions are, how to deal with parents and how to get this. Parents, especially parents that work full-time, it's like, Oh my gosh. I mean, and that whole process would be drug out an entire year. Meanwhile, that book sits in the library. So this is the kind of stuff. They're still opposing charter schools. In the Dallas area, we have 166 public school charter schools who have long waiting lists. And they come up every single session and they demand more regulations on just charter schools. For them, they don't want any. And so it's a constant battle for school choice, or even charter schools, which are public schools, school choice. And they have all of the DEI policies. They have all this stuff against systemic racism. What is more systemic and racist than locking a student into their zip code based on where they're at socioeconomically? And so it's like they're such hypocrites as well. It's like, okay, we are trying to give kids a way out of that, and they want them locked in.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, so you might ask why, they have people that come and testify against ESAs, and they'll have people come testify against all kinds of things. And one of the things I realized is that these people are rewarded. Danielle Weston and I, we were not rewarded. In fact, when they found out that, we really liked Mays and we supported what he did, we actually are sectioned off from things like TASB. They know who we are. It was very strange. I was at a TASB conference and they're just talking to somebody, and they were from TASB, and they're like, oh, we know who you are. And I was like, well, that's interesting. There's a lot of trustees across the state of Texas, but they know who you are, and they reward these trustees. And if you go look, they're rewarded with awards. Some people just need an award, right? They get a pretty picture, and they get to tell their district, look, I won a TASB award. Go look at the kind of people that they give awards to. I just posted about this. You can go to my Twitter or my Facebook, and you'll see that they give these school districts that are failing, they give them awards as trustees. And then it gets worse than this, though. It's not just awards. They also then, some of these people, and I can prove this, so I have the receipts, these people end up becoming contractors. So trustees, if you play and you come to and you play their game and you support them, then you get financial benefit later after you're off your school board. In fact, and I learned this because we actually had the Fort Worth ISD president at the time, Cinto Ramos. He actually came and was doing training for my district while he was a Fort Worth ISD school board member, president. And if you realize, Fort Worth was not I think it was a C district at the time, and I always told people I don't learn from C districts, I need a district to learn from. So I wondered why he was there, but I realized he is all in TASB. He supports them, and he was actually doing what they call Lone Star Governance Training, which is actually through TEA. And I would like to bring up the fact that, and so you all can hear this, is that TASB has taken over a lot of things that I fully believe should be coming from TEA, such as training, policy, that kind of thing. We don't need it coming.
Well, and Mary, they are the very ones that are behind all of the lawsuits. I mean, on suing over A through F, right? So, and I have a bill for that, by the way. But they don't want parents to, they don't want a transparent process so that you can actually see where is your school, where are they on the failure scale. And so they just ran, I think it was a year ago, they just had a seminar and from one of their preferred vendors, of course, that did a seminar, and they quickly took it down right after it happened, but they were they were encouraging school boards to go back to their districts and stir teachers up over school choice. And they were like, you need to go up there, you need to tell them that they're losing money, that they're gonna lose their jobs, get them really angry, we need them fired up for the legislature to come up there and oppose us. And I mean, again, they're using the same thing. Here's one of the other quotes. They literally said in that seminar, you need to make your teachers weapons, okay? So notice the language that they're doing. The weapon, I mean, aren't they always saying, Governor Abbott held school, teachers hostage last year on salary increases? Well, we probably should never have gotten into that business in 2019 to begin with, because then school boards think, okay, we're going to not give you pay, we're not going to prioritize teachers in our budget. We're going to leave that now to the legislature, and we need you all to be mad at the legislature for doing that, or all to be mad at Abbott, and Abbott doesn't have anything to do with it, so that's kind of all ridiculous. But, you know, you're weaponizing this, and it's like, no, you use the word. You use the word. You're going to do weapons. And then they said, let me see if I can find the direct quote. They said, the state claims to be spending more and more money than ever before, which is true, we have. But they said, but yet our school budgets are stretched tighter than ever with inflation climbing, state mandates increasing. I mean, they are feeding the teacher lobbies to come up here and be all fired up over things that are not happening, over things that are not true. And it doesn't matter that we will increase the budget even more. I think last session, with inflation, we increased public education funding by I think it was 7.8% something. It has increased each and every year, but our test scores are not increasing every year. They're declining. So, but that is the machine that is feeding all of this against parents, against taxpayers, to give them choice of what they want to do with their tax dollars.
So, Senator Middleton, I want to bring it back to you. A couple of years back, Governor Abbott said that he was afraid that Texas local governments were going the way of California. Now, since then, the legislature has passed many reforms to slow that process down, such as the Death Star bill. But taxpayer-funded lobbying, this practice, keeps moving us in that direction. Does that concern you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, this is, like I said earlier, this is how the left gets their way without winning elections. And what the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying really does is it pulls the plug to drain the Austin swamp, right? And these associations, they're not representing us. They're not representing our voices in Austin. And they're not even, you know, a lot of people don't know this. They don't even actually represent local elected officials. They don't represent school board trustees individually. They don't represent county commissioners individually. They don't represent city council members individually. They represent the governmental bodies. So, like, for example, my sister-in-law is on the school board in Tyler, and when Joe Biden put out that Title IX order of you got to let boys and girls restrooms and locker rooms and showers, Tyler sent a letter to TASB. We pay you a lot of dues to defend us and stand with us. We're gonna say no, we're not letting that happen. We're not letting boys into girls' restrooms, locker rooms, and showers in TASB. Sent them a letter back and said no. So literally, they're not even representing who they claim they represent. You know, so I mean, this is just, it's an incredible waste of taxpayer money as well. And you think about some of the hypocrisy too, where I think Terry's filed the bill this session, but you know, basically all it did is allowed public school choice. So if a child or private was groomed or sexually abused, a child is groomed or sexually abused, like these are the worst case scenarios, then it allowed that parent of that child to choose a different public school or private school, and they lobbied against that. So they literally used your tax dollars to trap a child in a situation that they were being groomed and sexually abused in, and that is what your school tax dollars are being used on right now when they go to TASB. And they have a racket, I'll give you that. They've been very smart at it. So they provide the single bid, no bid risk pool insurance. They do the buy board for all the provisioning that school districts have. They do the legal advice, and they do the investment pool. So right now, I think it's called Lone Star Investment Pool that TASB has, manages nearly all of the school district reserve funds. And it mainly goes out of state, and then all of these entities combined shed the profits to go to their lobbying interest. And it's millions and millions and millions of dollars a year. And of course, it's the whole preferred vendor thing, right? Here, come to our conference and come meet your preferred vendor, like, Huckabee Architecture, which is owned by out-of-state private equity. And then guess what those preferred vendors do? They provide the money for, like, say, the bond pack, right? And then when the bond passes, guess who gets the contract, right? And this is all about TASB. This is their business model, essentially, to extract dollars out of your pocket. So it's very corrupt.
So Senator Middleton and Representative Leo Wilson, wouldn't you say it'd be easier for, say, instead of a taxpayer-funded lobbyist coming to you with the League City or, City of Galveston's priorities, wouldn't it be easier if the mayor or the city council member just picked up the phone and called you?
That's what they do each and every day. Galveston County is 100% behind the banning on taxpayer-funded lobbyists. They came out and opposed 2 bills that were priority bills for our county last session. One was on appraisal reform, and the other one that they opposed was eliminating the treasurer's office. Those were 2 priorities for our county that the organization that they were paying money to came and lobbied against. So they, each and every one of those associations is using your government money to lobby against you, and it's just it's just never ending. Even with all of their, they tout, if you go to TASB's website, they tout that how effective they are at getting bonds passed. That's nothing more than a tax increase for all of you. We will never see property taxes go down or hopefully eliminated someday, but we'll never see that as long as we have taxpayer-funded lobbyists. We will never see election integrity unless we ban taxpayer-funded lobbyists. We will never see parents empowered to make educational choices for their children as long as we have taxpayer-funded lobbyists. I mean, I could go down the list and think about all of the legislative priorities that we as a Republican Party has, that the Speaker has, that the Lieutenant Governor has, that our Governor has, and they will oppose every last one of those issues.
Can I want to add something, because as a trustee, we never really know what they're advocating for. So if you think about all the trustees across the state, I don't know what they're coming into your all's offices and asking for. Like I said, they just send us an email, and usually it's not about what they're advocating for. It's just like, this is what you should be advocating for, but I don't know what they're telling you. And then here's another very strange thing. We have TASB, but Round Rock, Dallas, we also hire lobbyists for the school district. So they have, outside of TASB, so I have the numbers. I think we pay, in Round Rock, it's $200,000 to $400,000 a year to a lobbyist. Dallas is the same. So most big school districts also have this other lobbyist that they're paying. So obviously, that's kind of telling you maybe TASB isn't representing their values. So it's very strange outside of that. And so you do wonder why are school districts in TASB if they're paying these other lobbyists?
Exactly, and it's very different. I have both Chambers County and Galveston County. Galveston County opposes the taxpayer-funded lobbyists, and Chambers County supports them. And so my question to them all the time is, we talk every week. You can't just tell me what your priorities are and what legislation you don't like or you do like. This is ridiculous. And I mean, I've been pointed out to one, it's been, this is my 2nd term, but not once has, always, if elected officials in Chambers County want something done, they just call me. I've never had TAC call on their behalf and advocate for any of their stuff. So I let them know, I said, they're not doing your job. They're not representing you. They're not even telling me what your legislative priorities are. You're doing that. So cut out the middleman. You just do it.
Senator Middleton, I want to give you the final question before we turn it over to the audience for Q&A. How can we ensure that a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying isn't circumvented?
Right. So it has to be very strong and make sure you cover not just the directly hired lobbyists by local government, but through the associations too. And you also have to make sure that it covers all political subdivisions. You don't want any games of hey, we're going to create this little entity that doesn't levy a tax. So SB 19, grateful the Lieutenant Governor made that a priority bill, just filed that today. It's always been a top priority of his. It covers all public funds. We don't want any games of, hey, this is a fee, so it's not a tax, so we can hire lobbyists with that. You just have to say public funds, period, cannot be used to pay for lobbyists. And that threshold, of course, is Chapter 305, and it is up to citizen enforcement. I include a cause of action where you can sue to stop it, right? I mean, who better to enforce it than us? The government, again, doesn't have any rights. It's all belongs to the people, and who better to enforce that than a citizen right of enforcement? So I think that's also important to include, where we maybe haven't done that before in bills, and we need to make sure that we provide that accountability. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is cutting out the middleman, right? Why are we paying for this? Why are we paying $100 million for this? Why are we feeding this machine that clearly doesn't care about parents or about kids or about taxpayers, isn't even representing our local government elected officials directly, even at all? So it's time to end this corrupt and unethical practice in the state of Texas. And you know what? We're sick and tired of it. And I think we have this national movement right now that you've seen with DOJ, right, of exposing this waste, fraud, and abuse, right? And what better example of waste, fraud, and abuse to be eliminated than taxpayer-funded lobbying? So let's do what we said we were going to do and get rid of it this session.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Q&A, so raise your hand and make sure that the question ends with a question mark. Can we do the young lady over here?
We spent all this time talking about TASB and the educational part. Do we have other associations throughout the state that are not education related, and have these been identified, and have we quantified the amount of our taxpayer dollars that are going to them?
Texas Municipal League, we've got, I mean, all of them. Yeah, TAC, Texas Association of Counties. So, yes, election administrators, TASBO,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it goes on and on.
And TPPF, have you been collating all of these associations?
So TASB is usually the first one that comes to mind.
Okay.
TML is another big proponent.
And the other thing I had to ask is that when it comes to taxpayer dollars and whatever, oh, Lord. I've been sitting here waving my hand the whole time. Oh, our State Board of Ed has worked, because every time our trustees were elected, TASB was in charge of their indoctrination, and they made it where it has to be a State Board of Ed approved, and I'm not sure if did they remove TASB as an accepted source for training our trustees?
I think there's like over 200 options on the TA website that any district can access to get their training. They don't have to do the TASB training. There are alternatives. But like for some things, and I have a bill on this, but for Texas Association of Counties, that's not true. We're going to have to change some statutes, because they still require, Texas Association of Counties has all of the training that's required by law for county judges. So we need to create an option there. So.
Yeah, and I have legislation on that, you know, where right now in the law, they're very clever, I'll give them that. They put it in the law that school board trustees and county commissioners, judges have to receive continuing training every year. If they don't, they can be removed from office. And I'm like, look, we don't, as state rep, senator, we don't have to have required, our voters tell us what we're supposed to do. That's our training, what we campaigned on and doing what we said we were going to do. I've got a bill to repeal that. I'm not saying you don't, it's not a prohibit training. You just don't have to go. And I'll give you an example of just how bad it is. So Galveston County left Texas Association of Counties. They said, we're sick and tired of paying tax dollars to an association that doesn't represent our values, our conservative values. And they keep sending them an invoice, and they won't pay it. And they said, just reminding y'all, under the law, y'all have to get training in order to be eligible for office. If you don't pay these dues, guess what? You're subject to removal from office. Does that sound very voluntary or fair? Sure sounds like a threat to me, right? I mean, if you're the only one that can certify these hours, right, and they are, and then if you don't want to pay those dues, you can't be certified, then what? Right, so this is also important to make sure that, you know, our local elected officials are accountable to you, the voter, and not held hostage by these taxpayer-funded lobbying groups that have control over their mandated training.
Terri, I think you filed a bill in this session to limit superintendent severance pay, and I've had, and there are other bills from Carrie Isaacs and Ben Baumgarten to limit superintendent salaries. Do you know what committee that's going through, and what is the chances of passing?
It'll probably go through Pub Ed. I offered it last year. It makes sense. I mean, you know, whether we do something with superintendent salaries, we absolutely have to do something with severance pay. We have a school district that I have a little bit of, Mays has most of it, that got into a situation where they hired a superintendent from Pennsylvania that had problems in Pennsylvania, right? So like, why would you do that in the first place? So, but they had to give something like a $600,000 severance pay package to the person for only being there less than a year. So if we limited that I think that would help school boards. School boards could say, okay, well, we got a cap from the legislature. I'm sorry, but we got to get rid of you, and this is all we can give you to get rid of you. So that's just a much better use of tax dollars. Whether or not, I don't think the one limiting superintendent pay, I don't know if that's going to happen, because that is a local school board decision, and they hired that CEO, and that is a contract. And I don't know how you limit that legally in law, but we definitely could put a cap on severance pay on when somebody you need to get rid of is like basically, you know, strangleholding the school board and saying, we're not leaving unless you give us this. So we could definitely do that. So I think that actually mine has a better chance, but I don't know. Who knows, right? You know, the climate in the House is all about relationships. And if you tick off the wrong person and that person's got the hearing on your bill or whatever it might be, or you didn't vote for their bill, it's very relationship orientated. So some of it will be depending on that. And that's why I, for the most part, really work on relationships with everybody. And even on my bill on sex grooming and being able to take your child to a different school or a different district, that one has bipartisan support, because I made the plea, and I had relationships with many of the Democrats saying that, look, if we're doing this for bullying and we're saying a parent can do this, why would we not add sex grooming in there? Why would we not? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And they're like, well, yeah, you're right, that we should add that. So I think it makes perfectly sense to both parties, but, you know, who knows by the time TASB gets to everybody that's co-authoring on there if they'll hang in there with me. But because they will be opposed to anything that, I mean, can you imagine anything more horrific than being a parent of a child that has happened to, and you're expected to put them right back in that? And usually that stuff gets out among the student population, and I mean, it's devastating. I had a little girl in 7th grade, this situation that happened at my school, and I mean, she could not get her reputation back. She could not get it back. And thank goodness the child was moving out of state. And you know, when I talked to her, I said, you have a fresh start, baby. I said, you do. I said, take your fresh start. Nobody knows where you're going, what happened to you. And so, but I mean, it followed her. And, you know, the parents were poor, and grandma was raising her and wasn't paying attention. And so it was heartbreaking. It really was. Why would TASB be against that?
Thank you. Thank you all so much for bringing light to this. It's such an important issue. We are starting in Williamson County to compare notes at the commissioner court level and contracts, and the construction contracts given there tied to the same contractors in the schools, the road and bridge. We're seeing trips being given to different elected officials. We're seeing donations made to those elected officials. So I think it's very important for anyone. What do we have, 1,200 school districts across the state? A lot of school districts. Every school district ought to be doing a vendor review in this DOJ and we need a Doge committee in every county. And I really look forward to seeing what happens in legislation to connect the dots here with these vendors and this buy board that you talked about. So thank you all very much for what you're doing.
I think that's why Mays's transparency bill, I don't know what you're calling it, but just creating the transparency where taxpayers can see all of the slimy connections. And once they know that, information, is power. So we've got to figure it out. We've got to create some transparency where we truly know what are they doing with this money.
Yeah, your county bonds, your school bonds, your city bonds, they're all the same construction vendors. Take a look at that.
We got, $200 billion in school debt right now. And that is pledged against the permanent school fund, right? So that is state dollars. The state is, guaranteed those bonds. And those are local vendors that are lobbying to spend our tax dollars, right? And I think they should have to register to lobby like everyone else, right? So we know who they are, because that's what they're doing. They're lobbying for our tax dollars, and every bond is paid for with property taxes. A bond is a property tax increase, period, the end.
And those trustees only have to report if they own the company, not the subs underneath them.
And when you pass a bond, only about 40% of that ever gets to, the school or the classroom. The other 60%, a great deal of that is going to fuel TASB's tentacles.
First of all, appreciate everything that y'all do for the taxpayers. I was talking to a representative from TML and asked what issues are they worried about. And one of the issues the guy said was about the bonds becoming becoming a 2/3 vote. And I said, well, why is that? Are you afraid of taxpayer accountability? He said, well, we're just worried about our bonds not passing. I'm like, well, all right. But I have a question for you. A lot of my colleagues on city council have been told or concerned by fake news by TML saying that banning taxpayer fund lobbying would ban city council members, county commissioners, and school board members from actually going to talk to legislators. And I know y'all have alluded to this, but can you better define what is taxpayer fund lobbying and what isn't? And also, how do we make TML and TASB enemies of the state of sanity? Yeah.
So there is an exception for local government and people that work for local government coming to Austin, being reimbursed for travel. They don't have to register to lobby. There's a total exemption for that. That's what we want to have happen, whether that's, the mayor or city council member or the city manager or someone that works for the city manager, right? I mean, that's who we want to hear from. They're directly accountable to voters. That's in the budget. Their cell phones are subject to open records, their emails. It's the taxpayer-funded lobbyists that aren't, the hired guns, right? They're kind of the pass-through where we have no idea what they're doing, and we know it's not good because they don't have to disclose anything. So what it actually does is it increases the voice of local elected officials because they don't have someone speaking on their behalf things that they don't agree with, and they're not actually being told a lot of the time what those Austin lobbyists are doing in the halls of the Capitol. So at the end of the day, this makes local government and state government, of course, more accountable to our taxpayers, and they're going to have their voice elevated because it's what it really does. The ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying elevates the voice of taxpayers, elevates the voice of citizens because you're not having your own tax dollars used to compete against what you believe in and silence what you believe in. It's the other way around. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is silencing taxpayers and citizens. That's what's happening.
Yeah, and I'll just add that TASB, it's interesting, at their conferences, they're always telling us that they're amplifying the voice of the trustees. And they're actually twisting what you said, and they're flipping it, where they're saying, if you're 6 hours away from Austin, you can't go down to Austin, and they're going to do horrible things in Austin if we don't go down and lobby for you. So they put a lot of fear. I always say the left rules by fear, and so TASB uses a lot of fear. If you don't have us, who's going to go to Austin, and who's going, Mays is from the Galveston area. He's not going to be interested.
Who's going to get your insurance for you?
Yeah.
Who's going to get your gasoline for your
energy.
school buses?
Yeah, they don't say that part out
never-ending.
loud, but they do fear of, oh, you're a small district. It costs so much to go to Austin, and you can't go down there, and, that Austin and that area is going to, they're going to go down lobby, but you're not going to go down to lobby. So it's kind of interesting that they actually flip it and they tell a total lie.
Oh, and they'll oppose that 2/3. You know, that's great. Governor Abbott's agenda item there to raise the threshold, to raise taxes to 2/3. Rest assured, your tax dollars are going to be used this session to oppose that because, you know, heaven forbid, you know, they have to ask for permission from taxpayers to take more of their own money. You know, heaven forbid that happen, right? They're against asking taxpayers permission to take more of their tax dollars. So.
I think we need a taxpayers association, tax association for taxpayers.
Senator, does that first bill that you file every session does it ever pass the Senate? Yes. And also, it does. Okay, great. And then also, I mean, it's Democrats that are funding and for this taxpayer lobbying. And I just wonder if it's going to make it out of the House since the Speaker is always elected by Democrats.
So we passed in the Senate 3 times. I passed it last session, the session before that. Senator Betancourt did, the session before that. Senator Hall did. I had it on the floor. The last time it was on the floor in the House, I was there in 2019. It got 58 votes, and 20-something Republicans voted no. The good news is we had a very, very good primary election. And we made sure that Republicans that were not living up to their conservative promises did not return. So now, because we have the votes to pass school choice, I believe that means we have the votes to pass the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying in the Texas House. And the Speaker was a joint author of that bill in 2019 and helped me get it to the floor that year. So.
And he was the joint author of last year's bill, too. I'm carrying the ban taxpayer-funded lobbyist bill on the House side. However, if a more senior member on the leadership team would like to pick that up, I will be happy to do what I can to facilitate that bill getting passed. It's not, my bill per se, it's your bill.
And I just want to add, because you made a comment that it's the Democrats that are for like TASB and these associations, and that's actually what I came to find. It's actually not true. There's a ton of Republicans or conservatives or rhinos, what I don't know, but they're benefiting from this cartel that they've set up, and they're looking at this like, and I really do believe lots of them don't think it's a big deal to steal a few $1 million from the school district on, from the bond money. But what they don't realize is there's a lot of people doing that, and you're squishing the kids' education and really hurting the kids in the classroom. And I think as conservatives, we have to understand that it's not just, this is not a Republican-Democrat thing, that there are a lot of Republicans that benefit from the school district money and TASB. And I meet plenty of them that are Republicans that don't like me, and they'll watch this today, and I will see them, and they'll be like, you don't understand, you just don't know. And I'm like, oh, I understand that you benefit. Even in Round Rock, we have a city council Republican that her husband works for Bartlett Cock, which is a big contractor for school districts, and he benefits, and it goes back to they're all tied into the chamber, they're tied into the city, and you have to realize that this is bigger than just TASB, by the way, in the school districts. This is a whole cartel that they've developed over time in Texas that really does need to be broken and given back to the people so that we can, for one, get our education back, but also get our cities and counties back also.
I have time for 2 more questions.
Oh, I thought it was coming to me.
I'll pass it down to you.
No, go ahead.
TASB also sends school board members, I'm a school board member in my community, pay studies that they do very often, but only for administrators and superintendents, but our teachers are not paying more for eggs, only the administrators and the superintendents. So they're the ones telling us, oh, they're paying superintendents this amount here, so you gotta be in that range. And you mentioned Jacinto came over for some stuff, but I wanted to ask you about Lone Star governance through TA, and I know you were gonna mention a little bit about it, and I wanted to hear what you were gonna say about that.
Yeah, so the connection, and honestly, we talk about TEA and TASB, but it was kind of interesting in COVID. they got really blurred, and it actually exposed that TEA and TASB are so closely associated, and I can't really, I don't know all the relationships, but TEA was putting out, the governor was putting out orders, and TEA tried to put out orders, and then TASB like, no, that's our job. And so Lone Star Governance is this training through TEA, but Cinto was doing that, and he was tied into TASB. And so it's all TEA, TASB, and the training side. Again, they have tentacles, so if it's training, they have tentacles, even if it's in TEA right now. And Lone Star Governance, I mean, I'll just add, I am not a fan. I have a Ph.D. in systems engineering. They actually tried to use our principles. They reference people that I personally know, and it is not good training. So we need to work on the training in our school districts and have really good training with validity that's, yeah.
We need training freedom, right? We need a menu of, like, it's like accreditation for higher ed, you know, we need accreditation freedom where, like, in higher ed, they got in the problem with DEI that we'll talk about, you know, in panel tomorrow, but.
And I still like your bill on that it's, you know, it's an optional training. That's what it needs to be, because, again, you are elected to office. You ran on a certain platform. If you don't have the qualifications needed, your district can take you out. And that's the way it should work. That's how elections are supposed to work, not with this heavy influence to keep their friends there and then get rid of the people that are not cooperative.
So I'm told we've come up on time. Please join me in giving a warm applause to these folks.